This weekend in New York, 109 players paid $500 to play paper vintage for 8 pieces of real unlimited power. Let's see how it went. All right, welcome back, vintage gamers. I am excited to talk to you about the tournament I just played in this weekend, the NYSE Open 8. This tournament was a blast. The vintage community is unmatched in terms of friendliness, vibes. This was a $500 entry fee tournament, which is a crazy amount to pay in a Magic tournament. However, the entry fee was definitely justified by the prizes that were put out for this tournament. The top 8 got to draft 8 pieces of unlimited power, everything that wasn't an ancestral recall. So that means there was a Black Lotus, there was a Time Twister, there was a Time Walk, and there were 5 Moxen in the prizes for top 8 of this tournament. Based on the prize structure, based on the number of players, more things were entered into the prize pool. We hit 109 players for this event, so the TO even put in 500 store credit for 9 to 16. This event was just everything you could really want from a vintage event. A high number of proxies were allowed, which allowed a lot of people who didn't have power to play in the event, giving them a chance to win power. There was security, there were raffles, there were a wacky draft for players who went 0-2. There was commentary, so it was a great outing. Thank you to Nick Detweiler for setting up another historic vintage tournament. So I played in this event, of course. Anytime there's a large vintage tournament happening, I want to be a part of it. And I practiced quite a lot for this tournament. I was very much... I wanted to win. Let's put it that way. I would love to win one of these events. I have won a Mana Drain Open, which is the other Northeast vintage historic tournament, but I have not won an NYSE, though I do believe I may have gotten first or second on the online one. I don't know if we count that, though. For a paper NYSE event, I have not won one, so I wanted to win this event very bad, and I did a lot of testing leading up to this event. I played 9 leagues of Doomsday. And let me bring up quickly bring up the Patreon post here that talks about what I thought we were going to see in this meta game, in this tournament, because it was a bit of an awkward tournament in terms of card pool. This was directly following Magic Modern Horizons 3 release. So lots of things in flux, lots of shifting in the format, as Modern Horizons 3 actually released quite a few cards that are seeing play in the format. I had not thought that was going to be the case outside of the very obvious Vexing Bauble. But other cards definitely appeared in the tournament, and multiple Modern Horizons 3 cards were in the top 8. So before the tournament, looking at online data, I expected the deck to beat for the tournament would be Jewel Shops. Jewel Shops was the deck that won Eternal Weekend in North America, has had good records online since then. Kind of fell out of favor a little bit in the rotation, as you know, Luris Saga came to prowess, but then Oath came to answer Luris Saga, and once Oath came to answer Luris Saga, then Jewel came back into the forefront, and then immediately got upgrades from Modern Horizons 3. So Jewel got Sink into Stupor, the flip land. That's also a bounce spell, which as a 4 of is an auto include in Jewel and makes the deck much, much better at both casting blue spells and casting Force of Will's alternate casting costs. The league numbers for Jewel Shops in the last 2 weeks were outstanding, and the challenge numbers very strong as well. So I figured a lot of players will play Jewel Shops to be the deck to beat at this event. When you establish a deck at level 0 as a deck to beat, the level 1 answer is going to be decks that beat level 0. Those decks, I postulated that Doomsday, a fast combo deck with good counters, is going to have a good time against Jewel Shops. Data historically shows that is one of the best matchups in the format for Doomsday. Bug, a deck that has a lot of good pressure points for Jewel in terms of wastelands, in terms of null rod effects, in terms of forces, both vigor and negation and will. And then, of course, Lurrus Saga is overall, super strong deck, and it has the ability to tune itself to beat any other deck in the format, right? So you can tune your Lurrus Saga deck to have a couple more answers to what Jewel is doing. Maybe you're playing more null rods, maybe you're playing more steel sabotages, those kind of things. So I expected those to be the big 4 decks. Maybe people will play other decks that could be blue with null rod. But those are the decks I expected to beat. And so for me, I chose to play Bug because I think Bug, or not, hold up, Justin. Yeah, hold up. I chose not to play Bug, though my teammate Dan Nelson did play Bug, because that's just not the kind of style deck I like to play in Vintage, or the kind of deck that lets me demonstrate my strength as a player. I thought Doomsday was the best choice for me, and probably for a lot of players, as it is a very high win rate, strong deck against the field. If the field is going to be those 4 decks that I just said, I think the only really poor matchup data-wise was Lurrus Saga. But in my testing, I actually didn't find that to be super hard matchup. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But I felt like I had a good chance against the field. So what I did was I try-harded a bit. I played a bunch of Magic the Gathering. And that's like the only way to really learn a deck. In my opinion, you need to actually put the reps in. And so I played 9 leagues of Doomsday whenever I could. I ended my leagues with a 30-15 record, so a 67% win rate. And then I also played in a challenge. The Thursday challenge was the last challenge I could play in before NYSE, and I top-8'd with the deck going 5-2 overall, losing 2 matches to Prison Shops and beating a bunch of Lurrus Saga and Bug decks along the way. In my testing, I had trouble with Bug, just like it was a 50-50 matchup, definitely depended on which cards were drawn. And then I had some problems with like mono white and some of these more creature oriented decks. What I didn't have a problem with was Lurrus Saga, actually, even though in the data this is an unfavorable matchup for Doomsday, and even conceptually definitely seems like an unfavorable matchup for Doomsday. I think I went 8-0 or maybe 9-1, something like that, versus Lurrus Saga in testing. So I made a couple of tweaks along the way. This list changed not much. It actually didn't change very much at all. This list is 2 or 3 cards different from the first list I started testing. And one of the reasons is because Doomsday is pretty tight list now. It's pretty stock list, because now that you have 4 Ponder due to the unrestriction, you don't have to play 3 different like flex cards to fill in those Ponder slots. So the only choices that I really made was I started with 3 Flusterstorms, and I swapped one of the Flusterstorms for a Spell Pierce. This, I think, is overall probably weakens your deck. I think it makes you worse at doing your thing, but it gives you extra gameplay in the Jewel matchup and the Shops matchups in general. You have extra cards that are good in that matchup instead of having a dead card like Flusterstorm. Now, obviously, Flusterstorm has some utility in Jewel matchup, but it's actually a card you board out a lot in the Jewel matchup. So I swapped one Flusterstorm for Spell Pierce out of respect for Jewel, and I chose to play 1 Daze and no Negation main. I don't really like Negation in Doomsday because it's not proactively helping your game plan. It's going to save you, give you extra interaction versus a turn 1 combo deck. But I just don't find it to be exactly what I'm looking for out of my Doomsday deck. I'd like my Doomsday deck to have a lot of early combo pressure. In the sideboard, I have a lot of things that help versus Jewel. My sideboard is almost entirely, it's separated into 3 categories, which is very typical for how I build sideboards in Vintage. I have a bunch of cards that beat combo. I have a bunch of cards that beat Bazaar, and I have a bunch of cards that beat creature decks. So I have 2 Sabotages, a Null Rod, a Mindbreak Trap, and 2 Negations, mostly for Jewel. I have 4 Leyline and a Tabernacle for Bazaar. Then I have 2 Fatal Pushes and a Dress Down, sorry, 2 Fatal Pushes and a Dismember for creatures, and then a Dress Down is kind of this catch-all answer card that you get to bring in a variety of matchups, specifically Saga matchups, but even in the Mirror and those kind of things. Dress Down came in late into my build, and I really think it overperformed, so I like the 1 Dress Down in the sideboard. The Null Rod is very good. 2 Sabotages is great. The one thing that I changed and I ended up regretting a lot was I put this Dismember in place of a Shieldred. Shieldred was the card I was initially testing. Shieldred would come in against something like Countervine. It would come in the mirror, and it was coming in a bit in the Lurrus Saga matchup as an extra avenue of attacking that deck. I was beating the Lurrus Saga matchup in testing, so I decided, well, I don't think there's going to be any Countervine. I don't really know how much Doomsday there will actually be in this tournament. Doomsday is a hard deck to pick up if you haven't already been playing it. So I felt I will make the matchups that I had some problems with in testing, Mono White and Bug, because I felt like there were going to be a lot of Bug. I thought Bug might be like the second most played deck in the tournament. So I decided to put a Dismember in there to try to help that. The Dismember didn't end up being super relevant all tournament, and I really did want that Shieldred by the end. That being said, anything else interesting about this list? No, not really. Fatal Push, a lot of people will play Cut Down in this slot. I chose to play Fatal Push because I think the difference between Cut Down and Fatal Push is pretty minor. However, if I'm expecting to see more Bug over something like more Mono White Initiative, I think Fatal Push is slightly better. Fatal Push being able to hit Leovold, whereas Cut Down would not be able to. It was the big upside that I was looking for. Whereas if I expected a lot of Mono White Initiative, Cut Down being able to kill Archon of Emeria without needing Revolt is kind of, those are the two things that I was thinking about. So, how did it actually end up? Were the decks that I thought were going to see play actually the top decks of the format? And it turns out they were. Almost a spot-on analysis from me ends up being Jewel with the most played deck at 16 copies in 109. I will say that there are a couple missing deck lists here because of people who submitted via paper instead of via Melee. So some of these numbers might be a little different, but probably not huge changes overall. So Jewel, the most played deck. Bug, the second most played deck, still looking good. Lurrus Saga, a high play percentage. Oath, actually surprising me at fourth most played deck. I did not want people, I did not recommend people play Oath for this tournament because I thought Jewel is the best deck to beat. Jewel versus Oath is a Jewel favored matchup. You can make it better as the Oath player. There are lots of tools to make it better. But I felt if, Jewel is level 0 and anti-Jewel decks are level 2, Oath would be the idea of let me make my Oath deck good enough against the level 0 and play the level 2 game plan of beating all the level 1 decks. So if you thought that your Oath deck would have a good matchup versus Bug and versus Lurrus Saga, then maybe you can play Oath into those decks and try to hit that section of the field. But a little risky because if you hit the Jewel matchups and you're not actually that good against Jewel, it's a problem. If you hit like something like Doomsday, that's another tough matchup. So Oath at 4% of fourth most played, very surprising to me. Turbo Volky, you can kind of, it's very analogous to Lurrus Saga. It obviously is a deck with Lurrus and Saga in it. It's a more combo-oriented version of the Lurrus Saga shell, and a deck that I actually kind of think makes a lot of sense into this field. This would fall into this category of like blue decks that can play Null Rod. It's weird because the Turbo Volky deck doesn't want its opponent to play Null Rod, but in the Jewel matchup, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the where am I going? It's going to hurt the Jewel player much better than the Turbo Volky player, and the Turbo Volky player has lots of ways to tutor a Null Rod with Oswald and Demonic and Vampiric and the one Null Rod on the board. So it makes a lot of sense to see Turbo Volky here. This number is propped up a lot by I believe a team of players registered similar Turbo Volky lists, and so a large number of players on Turbo Volky. I think I like Turbo Volky over something like Lurrus Saga, but it's not so much of a difference that it's crazy. Other things showed up along the way with initiatives and other shops, Dredge, lots of brews, actually. Even though this is a $500 entry fee event, people were still willing to shell out and play their decks. For instance, we'll talk about it later, but in round 7, I played against Bizarre Workshops, combination gaming. So lots of still interesting things happening inside of the brewing space. And now you can probably have already seen down here the actual breakdown of the event here. But Lurrus Saga and basically the answers to Jewel Shops ended up triumphing. Jewel Shops had not a very strong day as the leading deck. Bug had an okay win rate, but Lurrus Saga really shined here. Turbo Volky really shined, and Doomsday really shined. So the Lurrus answers and the Doomsday answered to Jewel Shops prevailed as the best performing decks. That being said, they didn't win the tournament, which I find very funny. Take a quick look at the standings here. The winner of this tournament ended up being Brian Koval, Bosch and Roll on YouTube. Very powerful wizard, and one with an archetype that actually performed less than 50% overall. So if you take out the fact that Brian Koval won this tournament, the Oath record would be substantially lower. So an impressive performance winning with a deck that was probably unfavored in the tournament. That being said, Brian made some great changes to his deck list, adding things like Thoughtseize and Null Rods to the main to help a combo matchup, and ended up vanquishing a Doomsday player, a Beseech player, a Jewel player, all of his bad matchups on the way to winning this tournament. So congrats to Brian Koval. You can see here 3 Turbo Vault Key in the top 8, 1 Luris Saga control deck, 1 Jewel Shops, 1 Doomsday, and 1 other blue control. What could that be? We're going to take a look at that deck right now. Why don't we take a look at that deck right now? Because that deck is interesting. I got to go to the quarterfinals here. Oh, man. Can we... Bant Tempo. We found it. We found the link. God bless. This was the other top 8 deck, and yes, you're seeing that correctly. That's a Nadu Winged Wisdom. So we had a Bant Tempo creature-based Nadu. Not even really a combo deck because this is no Thassa's Oracle, just value Nadu Bant cards. So really impressive top 8 here for basically a rogue deck from Patrick. Really, really cool. So that is your big breakdown here. And you can see another way here. You can look at it and see Luris Saga, Turbo Vault Key, and Doomsday as the best performing decks of the tournament. Pretty as expected, and a wide range of decks as well. I would say, 23, 24, not bad. One thing to note here is no Bazaar. No Bazaar. So while the field was pretty wide, 4 Dredge decks that performed very poorly, Bazaar is weak into this metagame. There's no getting around that. I think it's hard to show up with something like Countervine when people are trying to play Vexing Bubble, and then as long as people respect Dredge, it's a deck that can be answered, and people seem to be ready for the Dredge matchup. So let's go a little bit over my tournament. So I signed up with Doomsday, and then I'm going to just go through each round and just do a little bit of talking and see what we can glean. Why am I searching Doomsday? I can't even spell my own name. Okay, Justin Gennari versus Alicia, sorry. This was a Jewel Shops matchup. So round 1, right off the bat, I got to play against the matchup I wanted to see. Coveted Rings, Coveted Jewels, the One Ring, very stock looking Doomsday list here. We have some interesting tech with Transmute over more like Sinks to Super and those kind of things. Hull Breachers in the sideboard. These matchups went exactly how I would have suspected them. I was able to counter an early play and then go for an early combo and win. And then in game 2, sideboard cards came in clutch. Was able to use multiple Steel Sabotages to hold off Mycosynth Lattice and Karn before winning that. So round 1, we get off to a nice solid start, find the exact matchup we're looking for, and get the round 1 win. We go to round 2, and I'm on camera. This is a feature match. I assume those videos, they were on Twitch, and they will hopefully go on YouTube. When I find those videos, I'll make sure they get linked inside of the Discord. I played against a pretty competent wizard from New York. I'd seen them before at the NYSE qualifier event. And they were on Luris Saga Control. And this is the first time I'm actually seeing this list, and this is a banger right away. 4 Modern Horizons 3 cards. Psychic Frog, Nethergoyf, only 2 Bowmasters, okay, and 1 Vexing Bauble, some Dress Downs. It's a Demonic Consultation in this deck. That's kind of interesting. Null Rods, some interesting stuff here. These matches are on camera, so you'll probably be able to see them at some point. I got crushed, and I didn't even see some of these cards because my opponent vintaged me pretty hard. They had starting hand of Urza Saga, multiple Moxen, Black Lotus, Vexing Bauble, Wasteland. I got my basic strip mined in two different games. I got my basic strip mined. I had some different ways I could have played the game, maybe put myself in a little bit of a better position. But overall, when the Lura Saga deck has the counter spells, they have the Moxen, they have the Wasteland and strip mines, they get rolling really quickly. It's very hard to stop them. So I ended up getting crushed in this match, and now I'm starting the tournament 1-1. Pretty rough. Really looking, this is going to be an 8-round tournament, looking to never pick up a second loss and try to get in on 7-1 would be the record we're looking for. So took an L there to a competent Lura Saga pilot. And then in round 3, I am up against Adam. Adam is a player I know online, a player who's very competent in a variety of formats. And Adam was also on a Lurrus controlling deck. This is an Esper version of the deck, having some Tundras so they can play Seals and those kind of things. This was a very interesting match. We played a 3-game set. Game 1 was probably the most interesting because I went with a Gitaxian Probe and was able to see Adam's hand containing 1 Force. I then went and resolved a Doomsday with Force backup, so I countered the Force. And so I resolved a turn 1 Doomsday, and I have to make a pass the turn pile against a deck that has a lot of various answers here. And unfortunately, the Gitaxian Probe showed me a Bauble. So I actually have 2 unknown cards I need to beat. I need to beat the top card of the deck and the card that gets drawn off Mishra's Bauble on my following turn. And so it was a little tough. I wanted to make sure I built a pile that could beat Ancestral Recall, Flusterstorm, Spell Pierce. I wanted a hand that might be able to beat a Vexing Bauble. I wanted to be able to beat a Wasteland. I wanted to be able to beat Blue Card Force. And I don't think I came up with the correct pile. After Doomsdaying, my 2 cards in hand were Sapphire Ponder, which is really good because you can break into your Doomsday pile. But because I don't have a second cantrip, a free cantrip, I wasn't able to win the game on the spot. So in my head, I had to choose which card to pitch to Force of Will, and I had to choose between Ponder and Oracle. So I thought, I pitch the Oracle, I get the Ponder, I can break into my pile, which is the normal heuristic. However, it's a little tough because there's not very many cards I can break into that do something right away. So I was thinking maybe I was supposed to pitch the Ponder and leave an Oracle, so that way if my Oracle gets Force of Will, I have a second Oracle. So I built a pile, but then I realized my pile is it's going to lose to Blue Card Force of Will. Now, how often is my opponent drawing Blue Card Force of Will on the top of their library? Maybe not that much, but I did realize that. So I built a pile that was like a little redundant against Wastelands and Flusters and Spell Pierces, right? I built a pile that had Ancestral and Time Walk and Oracle and Lotus and those kind of things, and another land in case I got Wastelanded. But I ended up my opponent did hit the Force of Will blue card, and I got my Oracle countered and lost the game. We actually talked for a long time after the match trying to figure out what was I supposed to put in this pile, and we didn't really come up with anything amazing right away. But we talked with a Doomsday player, a British Doomsday player, who suggested a pile where the Ponder dug into a Mental Misstep, and then there was the Ancestral, Lotus, Oracle, and Flusterstorm. And that pile seems much, much better. That pile will actually play around a lot of the cards I already talked about, Spell Pierce, Flusterstorm, by just having this misstep, and it also plays around Ancestral targeting me. It plays around Vexing Bauble. So I really, really like that pile, and wish I had come up with it at the time. But I didn't even come up with the correct pile even after talking about it for 10 minutes. So that's some of the hard parts about Doomsday is I came up with a good pile. I came up with a pile that beats a lot of things, and I came up with it in a good enough time. But I did not come up with the 100% pile. And because I didn't come up with the 100% pile, I was at the mercy of my opponent's top of the library, and I ended up losing that game. Game 2, I ended up taking game 2. Honestly, hard to remember much of the other 2 games because I just... or maybe there were only 2 games. I was just so focused on that first game. I can't even remember what happened in the other games. No, I can't remember at all. But the first game stuck in my head because it was one of the piles that I would take back. There were very few things that happened during the tournament that I felt like I made a mistake and I wanted to do something different if I could do it again. That pile was one of them, and then there was a couple mulligans later in the tournament. So that was one of the piles I just felt like if I was better, if I was Discover N, maybe I'm winning that game. I am going to win that game if I'm Discover N, right? And that's you know, part of the struggles in playing Doomsday is there are a lot of ways to gain the last few percentage points, and they're not easy. I would say that the floor of Doomsday is really high. It's actually really easy to make 80%, 85% piles, but it's very hard to make 95%, 100% piles. So I actually end up losing this match, well fought match here, and that actually puts me out of contention somewhat. There's theoretically going to be some X2s that make it because this was an 8-round event for reasons. I believe because there were a bunch of buys, we were given an extra round to make sure that we could, you know, the buys would play out. But it still feels weird. I don't think we were supposed to have another round. It's weird. But some X2s were probably going to make it. So I wanted to play it out, try to get as many points as I can. I also wanted to play it out for the team trophy. In this event, I teamed with Dan Nelson and Brian Koval. We had team name Mental Missteppers because all three of us had won an Eternal Weekend 2023 promo Mental Misstep. So a strong team, and I wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves the best chance of winning the team trophy, even if I was out of contention for top 8 early. So I went to round 4, played against Dead Horse, played a very fun match of Magic with against Bug. This Bug deck had 4 Psychic Frog. This is something you're going to see a lot actually in some of these lists. Is Psychic Frog was awesome. Every time I seen Psychic Frog in testing. Oh my god, I'm just... There's 3 endurance in this sideboard. Oh boy. Okay, sorry. Psychic Frog in testing was extremely strong. A very hard card for decks like Doomsday to deal with because the card advantage is just so overwhelming. I'm going to play a bunch of Psychic Frog decks coming up on the channel because this card seems very, very good. That's one of the MH3 standout. It's probably the MH3 standout from this tournament for me. Lots of decks in a variety of different archetypes. Bug, Luris Saga. We're playing Psychic Frogs. So we played a pretty fun back and forth matchup with Bug here. I think the Bug matchup is probably one of the more interesting matchups for Doomsday because Bug has lots of ways to interact with you. They have Deathrite Shamans eating cards out of your yard. They have Wastelands hitting your mana sources. They have a bunch of counter magic. They do have some dead cards, but they also have like Collector Roof, slowing down your Lotus kills, and they provide these cheap threats with Force Backup and Wastelands. So that makes it for a hard matchup. I don't think it's a bad matchup for Doomsday, but it's a matchup that is close, and it's a very interesting matchup because there's a lot of different pinpoint. So I tested a bunch against Sultai with Dan on the ferry over to New York, and I do like the matchup. But it's very back and forth, very fun matchup. So I got a win there versus Bug, back up to 2-2. And then we played against Ryan Fisher. Ryan Fisher was on Turbo Volt Key, among a lot of other players in this tournament. Turbo Volt Key deck I really did like for this event. I thought there's a lot to be gained by playing main deck Caracas, by being able to tutor for Bobble and those kind of things. And then Luris is just that good. Luris is super strong. Unfortunately for Ryan, these matches were not super interesting. I had some extremely powerful draws with early turn 1 Doomsday kills and those kind of things. So that one was probably one of the fastest matches of the tournament. Just sometimes the Doomsday deck really does just churn out easy wins, which is another reason I really like the deck. I think your vintage deck should give you some free wins, and if your vintage deck isn't giving you any free wins, it's probably not the right deck for the format. So 3-2 now, moving on to round 6. Round 6, we played against Adam, another fun matchup versus Bug. I had some really fun. These Bug matchups were really fun. Lots of interesting back and forths and tutors, and always a wild experience to try to build your piles and have them make sure you can beat like, oh, a random Assassin's Trophy on your land, or I can't build my pile with Black Lotus because there's a Collector Roof in play. This Deathrite Shaman ate my Ancestral. I actually think this might have been one of the rounds where I don't know if it was this round, but I cast a Treasure Cruise and I exiled Ancestral Recall, Time Walk, and Black Lotus. So that's a whole section of cards that are very important for my Doomsday piles. And so sometimes you have to build some really weird things, and sometimes you have to build things where you can't draw cards because of Leovold. So lots of fun matchups for these bug matchups. I was able to vanquish Adam here, and I actually went into round 7 at 4-2 now. So we're making a comeback. Round 7, I played against one of the Farino brothers, Vinny, and this is probably the coolest deck we played against in the tournament. Maybe it's the coolest deck in the tournament. I don't know. I like Nadu. This is Vinny's 3-in-1 deck, I believe he calls it. It is a Workshop Bazaar combo or a combination deck. Not really a combo deck, but more of a combined deck, I should say. So this is Urza's Saga, Wasteland, Workshop, Bazaar, Ancient Tomb, Yavimaya, Boseiju, heavily on 4 Crucibles for Wasteland locks and other things, and 4 Null Rods because powerful prison piece, but leveraging the power of the Vengevine Hollow One shell with 6 Root Wallas, 4 Stonecoil Serpents as a 0 mana return Vengevine, or a scalable threat off of Workshop. Very cool. Walking Ballista. I actually think Walking Ballista is a really cool card right now. Does a lot of interesting things. It's a little awkward with Null Rod, but you can always play this as a 0 to bring back your Vengevine as well. There is a Hex Drinker in here, interesting, and 1 Golos to tutor lands, and 1 crop rotation, though I saw that crop rotation a couple times, so I kind of thought there were 4 crop rotations, to be honest with you. A cool deck. I actually think this is a kind of deck that might play really well into Lurrus Saga. Has a lot of must counter threats, and a bunch of lands that are really going to tax Lurrus's Wastelands. A really cool deck. I assume this deck is going to struggle versus combo. This is the kind of deck that is really going to struggle versus combo, but has some pretty nice game plans against like more of these fair blue decks. It made for a very hard match as a Doomsday player because I have no reps. I don't know exactly what to play around. Don't know what's exactly in the list. Game 1, he returned a Vengevine on turn 1 with a Root Walla and a 0 mana Stonecoil Serpent, and that 5 power was enough to really tax my life total. I was trying to set up, I had a Vamp Tutor and an Oracle, and I was trying to get to 3 lands to set up Oracle Consult because I thought my life total was a little bit too low to go for something with Doomsday. That might not actually have been the case. I think if I had to play that game back, I might try to actually make a Doomsday pile instead of trying to go for Oracle Consult. But in the end, I actually did make it to 3 lands, and I did make it to Oracle Consult, but the last land I had was a fetch, and I was at 1. So I just enough damage from the Root Walla Vengevine combination to take game 1. Game 2, I get to bring in a bunch of things, and at that point, it was a little bit easier because I don't actually really care that much about Null Rod, so I can kind of maybe counter a hollow one, stem the bleeding, leave counter magic for things like Mindbreak Trap, or I didn't know if there'd be like crop rotation or Noxious Revival, those kind of things. And I was able to make some Doomsday piles. I had a Leyline, which really prohibited my opponent. There was a really funny combination in that game where he went Bazaar, activate pitch cards, play a Black Lotus, crack for green, crop rotation the Bazaar, and I'm like, oh man, what is this gonna get? And I got another Bazaar looking for, you know, like a Null Rod or a Collector Roof or something like that. I was able to win that game 2, and then in game 3, I actually built a really cool pile, and I wanted to basically build a pile that could beat my opponent playing both a Wasteland and a Boseiju. So I had like a Street Wraith and a Gush, but there was a Collector Roof out, so I couldn't win right away. So I kept a Gush floating on top, and I put an island at the bottom so that when I got Wastelanded, I could Gush my 2 lands back to my hand. And then if I got Besieged after, I could put the island into play. And then my other 2 cards were like Oracle, and a cantripping card, free cantripping card. So no matter what happened, I would be able to play an Oracle and be able to win the game on the next turn. And it just so happened that because I couldn't win the game on the previous turn with the Collector Roof in play, I actually ended up playing around Mindbreak Trap because of it. So I ended up really being a very cool match, very interesting pile, some pile that I had never really made before because my opponent was playing an interesting brew. So now, final round, round 8, I'm technically still in top 8 contention. I am 5-2, and I get faced up against Nick on another Lurrus Saga control deck. Now, I actually had ended up playing Nick many times online leading up to this event, at least 2 or 3, and I believe I hadn't lost a match in this matchup to Nick before. We ended up with a very back and forth 3-game set, very, very fun and interesting Magic, playing against this Luris Esper variety this time. The things I remember most about this match was in game 2, I set up a really cool pile that I didn't 100% like. It had like a fake ancestral in it, a fake ancestral on the bottom, because I didn't think it was going to matter too much. But I ended up getting time twistered. So I had a full 7-card grip. He had a new 7-card grip, attacking me with a construct. But I had actually put in the pile a dress down. And so with the gush, I was going to be like 50-50 chance to hit the dress down because it was still in my library after the twister. And so I went to 1 life from a construct, and he played an Orcish Bowmaster. And so I had this chance here where I can gush 50-50 to hit my dress down the Bowmaster so it doesn't trigger, untap. And I'm already at 2 cards because of the twister. And I can just slam an Oracle and win. Unfortunately, my opponent's twister did hit both Bowmaster and Force of Will and stop that. This is a hand that I don't know if I would have wanted to keep again. In this game, I was on the draw, and I kept a hand that had multiple Doomsdays in it. And my logic was, as long as I wasn't clocked too fast, I would be able to just cast these Doomsdays and have them be forced, and cast these Doomsdays and have them be forced, and eventually overwhelm my opponent with a high number of threats. This did kind of work. By the end of the tournament, by the end of this game, I had cast 3 Doomsdays, and the 3rd Doomsday finally resolved. And it was resolved in a way that gave me a chance to win the game. However, it was very slow and put me in like a very risky position. And I think if I had to take it back, maybe I would have looked to try to find a better hand with maybe more cantrips, more versatility. Looking back, I don't really like the hand that I kept. Game 3, kept a good hand, played a land, a cantrip, and passed, and my opponent went land Black Lotus Time Twister, just random 7 for both of us, and my opponent's random 7 was very good. My opponent's random 7 had the Lotus again, as well as a Force and a Bowmaster, and my random 7 had no lands, and I never drew a land for the rest of the game, and I lost. Very fun and interesting match. So I end this tournament at 5-3. I end this tournament at 5-3, and I ended up in like 20-something-ish place. And I had lost all 3 of my matches, like I said, to Luris, Saga, Control. The matchup that in testing, I had never really lost to, but I cut the Shieldred, and then I had a really hard time in this tournament with that matchup. So moving forward, maybe I need to be a little bit more precise with my testing, and maybe be a little bit more introspective of when you have a false positive. I did play a lot of matchups for Luris Saga, and I even played them outside of leagues in challenges, and I just felt like the matchup was not bad. I was doing good things, but maybe the 1 card I cut made it weak enough that I hurt my chances. That being said, some of these Luris Saga matchups, I actually did have the ability to probably win, like the round 3 versus Adam. I felt like I could have played better and won. And round 8 versus Nick, I felt like maybe I mulliganed incorrectly. So it's absolutely possible that it was just skill diff. I didn't play to the level that I was holding myself to. A little bit hard to say. So I go 5-3 in this tournament. Our teammate Dan Nelson goes 3-5 with Bug. And Brian Koval makes the top 8 with the Othek. I actually end up on camera and commentating the whole top 8, which was awesome. Thank you to Nick, and of course thank you to the other casters who allow me to do some guest commentary. They're there to do their job, and it's very nice of them to allow me to come in and do commentary. I love doing vintage commentary. I find it extremely fun, extremely interesting. I love sharing what I know. The only problem with vintage commentary for me is I would rather play in the tournament. So I try to, when I have a fast round or I'm out of the tournament, try to see if I can help out the tournament in any way in doing some kind of guest commentary, because I find it extremely enjoyable. I won't go too much into those. Hopefully those matchups, like I said, will go on YouTube and you can watch them. But we got to commentate on all 3 of Brian's matches, quarters, semis, and finals. and also another semifinal on the other side of the bracket. So lots of cool stuff happening. There are some crazy plays in that top 8. Definitely go check it out. I don't know how long it'll be on Twitch, but if you go to Twitch, I feel like it's called, twitch.tv NYSE Open. Let's just see if it's still there. Yeah, so they still currently have the recent broadcast from 2 days ago. I would assume that will go away eventually because Twitch doesn't let you hold these VODs forever. But I hope it would end up being put on YouTube as well. So that is my recap of NYSE. I did not win a Black Lotus or any other Moxen for that matter, but I wasn't unhappy with the tournament. I posted some pictures and stuff. This is the trophy, extremely cool trophy. Lots of sweet mats and art from Greg Fenton. Here was a little coverage area. And I just thought it was a great tournament. I really have to thank Nick for hosting these. These are hard tournaments to run. Nick loves them, Nick, and the community loves it back. But it's tough. You are putting up 8 pieces of power for prizes. It could go really poorly. But thankfully, we were able to find 109 players willing to play some high stakes paper vintage action with proxies for power. And it just ended up being a fantastic weekend. We didn't end up winning the team tournament, which I have to apologize to Brian Koval for. Even though Brian won, Dan and I's combined record of 8-8 was good, but not good enough. First place in the tournament had a team of 3rd, 9th, and 5-3, and second was something similar to that. So we ended up actually in 3rd in the team tournament. So Ryan once again let down by the teammates, me especially. I really thought I had a good chance here, but like I said, I am overall really happy about what I put together because I showed you my Patreon post here before the event about what I expected the metagame to be, and the metagame ended up being what I expected. So I say this a lot because I think it's good to understand where your strengths and weaknesses lie. Haters will always say that I think I'm so good. I have this huge ego, but I always know that I have never been the best technical player, and I've never been the best player at being a tournament player, a competitive player. I play Magic as a hobby, and I am competitive. I want to win, but I'm going to have a good time while doing it. I'm going to banter with my opponent. I built a couple of Doomsday piles in this tournament face up. I was like, we can build this face up. This is what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? There are edges to be gained that I don't always get by being the most competitive cutthroat. And then, like I said, I definitely have never been super clean technical player. I'm good. I'm very good. But the big edges that I get in Vintage are from playing the format a lot and spending a lot of time in the data. I think that a lot of the edges I gain are from metagame evaluations, knowing what people are going to play, knowing what deck is a good choice, and then tuning that deck for a specific metagame. And I think that I chose the best or maybe second best deck for this tournament. I put together a good deck and I put in the practice, and I had a good result. I went 5-3. Maybe I can go 6-2 if I play a couple percentage points better. Maybe I can go 7-1 if I get a little bit more lucky and can play a good deal better, like hitting the true 100% piles. But overall, I think a 5-3 finish is good, and I think a good, solid base performance for me going into future tournaments in the rest of the year, because there will be more tournaments this year. Eternal Weekend is coming up at the end of the year. Oklahoma City Land Run is coming up in a month. Definitely check out the Oklahoma City Land Run if you're in the middle of the country. That is a big tournament, legacy, vintage, team trios. I'm very excited to be able to fly out to that event. I didn't think I was going to be able to make it to that event, but the things have changed, and I will be going to that event, and I will be looking to win. I believe it's either a time walk or a Mox is on the line. So it's really cool to see these vintage tournaments coming back with power prizes. That's a very historic a precedent for vintage tournaments. Being able to play for power was something that used to happen a long time ago, before even I was playing paper vintage. So really nice to see organizers coming out with that kind of pricing. That's it. That's me recapping NYSE 8. Again, congrats to our friend Brian on winning a Black Lotus and an amazing trophy. And hopefully I can follow in his footsteps and do some winning in future paper vintage tournaments. If you enjoy content like this or just want to see vintage gameplay content, new videos come out on this YouTube channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I will see you then.